We are tight on time as usual. We do have a 30-minute time frame here, so I think we'll just get started. And this way I'll go through some of my things, and anybody else who's joining will be on time for Mary's presentation. So thank you for attending, everyone. This is the Cup of Tea event that we're having here tonight. I have a couple of announcements while everyone's coming on in. So the first one is just a reminder that the Retinoblastoma Research in You booklet is in clinics across Canada and online. It's an image of the booklet here, so you can look for it at your next appointment or your child's next appointment. It's at the retinoblastoma clinics. There might be some other items around. There's some stickers, and clinicians might have these hanging off their name badges. And if you don't have an appointment, or maybe didn't have a chance to pick one up, you can email us. I'll mail one to you. Email retinoblastoma.research@sickkids.ca. And we have our digital version on our website. If you go to www.rbcanadaresearch.com/rbresearchbooklet. The other announcement for the night, I just want to let everyone know that our Retinoblastoma research community, which most of you may know it as the Retinoblastoma Research Registry, is now open to researchers and health professionals to join, as well as all international retinoblastoma patients, researchers, and health professionals. So you can join by going to, again, to our website, rbcanadaresearch.com, and on the top of bar here, there's RB Research Community button to click. This is a way that we could all stay in touch. You can engage with us and receive updates on retinoblastoma research and events, so such as this cup of tea, so you could stay in the loop of what's going on. I strongly encourage everyone to sign up. That way you don't miss out on these things that are going on. Okay, so today I'll give you a quick update about what the cup of tea is. There's a couple of housekeeping items to keep in mind. And then we're going to have a talk by Mary Connolly Wilson, who will share an article summary of an article that she's done. And because we are tight on time, if you have any further questions or would like to continue the conversation, you can continue it on our Twitter. You can find us at RB_research with the hashtag #CrabCupOfTea. We will not be answering the questions right away, but within the next 24 hours, we will try to address everyone's comments and questions. So the Cup of Tea is like a journal club. It's an event intended to bring the Canadian retinoblastoma community together for an informal discussion about a research article. So the event has been occurring quarterly throughout 2021, and the previous Cup of Tea events are available on YouTube. And here's just a screenshot of my screen. So if you are in YouTube and you type in retinoblastoma research, you will get our account here. And if you click on it, there'll be the 2 previous Cup of Tea events. Anybody who has not seen them, I strongly suggest you do, especially our first one from March. It's a great presentation and also a great overview on how to read journal articles and how to do your own analysis about them. So the discussions at our Cup of Tea go center around articles which our CRAB members have created plain language summaries for. So for tonight's Cup of Tea, we'll be discussing knowledge, experiences, and attitudes concerning genetics among retinoblastoma survivors and parents. The plain language summary is available on our website under the heading on one of the headings on the top will be plain language summaries. And the housekeeping, just to make sure you have the best view possible, you could change your view, which would be an icon similar to this one here, change it to speaker view. And when we're doing any discussions or sharing comments, if you wouldn't mind using the raise hand function or type in your comments in the chat to make sure that we address your questions and comments. So the raise hand function could either be in the bottom of the screen under the participants, and then you click on the raise hand, or it might be under reactions, and then you select the raise hand. So our guest speakers today, we have Mary Connolly Wilson. She practiced as a genetic counselor in Canada for 30 years and has the RB1 mutation. Mary's a member of CRAB and has participated in several activities and events such as the regional working group meetings. We also, in partnership Dr. Jessica Hill helped create the plain language summary as well. She is an assistant professor at the University of Toronto in the Department of Molecular Genetics. And during her term as a postdoctoral research fellow at SickKids, she investigated how to best implement clinical cancer genetics services in Canada and Kenya. Now, the last I heard, unfortunately, Dr. Hill will not be joining us tonight, but if we have any questions for the authors of the article, we have Dr. Helen Damaris with us, and anybody else who might be interested to address these questions are welcome to do so. So I'll pass the talk over to Mary, who will be sharing her plain language summary.
Thank you, Ivana, for your introduction and your help as well for tonight's presentation. So I am part of a large retinoblastoma family. I had a maternal uncle who died of RB in the 1920s. And in my generation, 2 of my brothers and 5 of my cousins were diagnosed with RB. And there have been 3 children with RB born to 2 of those RB survivors. So I was the youngest of 8 siblings. And while completing research on retinoblastoma for my master's thesis, the findings led to a diagnosis of a retinoma in my left eye. And my mother and 2 of her siblings had affected children, but no sign of retinoblastoma themselves. When genetic testing was available for our family in 1994, all affected individuals, as well as the parents of those affected, were confirmed to have an RB1 mutation. The results also revealed an RB1 mutation in my niece and another of my uncles who previously had no indication of RB. And so therefore 17 mutation positive people in all. Then in late 1983, I was hired as a genetic counselor and helped establish the Newfoundland Genetics Program, where I worked for more than 30 years. So because of my personal and professional background, I was really interested in the findings of this study. So just as an introduction, in Canada, genetic testing and counseling are really part of the standard of care for retinoblastoma and accessed by families through their RB treatment center. So effectively conveying this genetic information is really essential for survivors of heritable cancers such as retinoblastoma, where the survivors who carry the germline mutation in the RB1 gene are at increased risk of second cancers in adulthood and also of passing on the disease to future offspring. So it's unclear of how much of the information is understood, prioritized, or really transferred by parents to their children with RB. So if you can give us the next slide. So the purpose or the goal of this qualitative study was to uncover the knowledge of the experience with and the attitudes about retinoblastoma genetics among retinoblastoma survivors and parents of children with retinoblastoma. There were only 15 participants, 2 were adult survivors, and 14 of those had a child affected with retinoblastoma. So they completed questionnaires that were demographic and also genetic knowledge based, and then 3 focus groups were held. So in those focus groups, participants were asked about their knowledge of retinoblastoma and retinoblastoma genetics, including the cause of disease and interpretation of the words genetic and inheritance. They were also asked about their experience with RB genetics, including genetics as part of the treatment program, follow-up, and also sources of information and communication with the healthcare team. And then they were asked about attitudes about RB genetics, including perceived implications, benefits, or challenges of RB genetics. So after the focus groups, a primer on retinoblastoma was distributed, and the moderator clarified any points of confusion or erroneous information that may have arisen during the discussion. Next slide. So during the study, in terms of the participants' knowledge of heritability, all parents of children with bilateral retinoblastoma reported the cancer as heritable. But with parents of children with unilateral retinoblastoma, out of those that were there, there was 1 knew it was heritable, 4 knew it was non-heritable, but 3 just didn't know. And so again, it brings to question what their knowledge is. Next slide. So in terms of the results of retinoblastoma knowledge, the study revealed most participants understood that retinoblastoma is a genetic disease and it involves mutation in the RB1 gene. But knowledge of the retinoblastoma genetics was variable and often limited. The genetic principles were often misunderstood, especially with regards to unilateral retinoblastoma and thinking that there's no future cancer risk or risk of heritability by the next generation. Patients and parents obtained information from many sources, but there is a risk that some information found through social media sources may really be inaccurate for the individual's unique situation. Next slide. So what I wanted to put out there for people listening now, especially if any of the authors are online, is whether one of the authors would like to share their experience of the participants' retinoblastoma genetic knowledge base, and whether there have been any enhancements to address the knowledge concerns since the study was completed.
I see, Helen, you've raised your hand. You can go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Mary, for that very nice summary. There's two things that came out of this study. One, what we were trying to address was how do we ensure that the counseling that's received by families actually leads to better understanding and subsequently decisions that are important, after that initial diagnosis as children grow up. What's interesting is this project's still ongoing. We have worked both in Canada and in Kenya to try to co-design educational tools that can help people better understand retinoblastoma genetics. As many of you in CRAB know, that means we need to apply for grants and have a method for seeing if these actually work. And we have submitted a grant to CIHR, that's the main Canadian funding agency for research. We haven't been funded, so it's ongoing. What's interesting though is that in Kenya, we've been able to go as far as developing a tool and testing it in the clinics. A very nice cartoon educational pamphlet was created with stories of the different ways retinoblastoma genetics can manifest. It's in English and Swahili. And so we've been able to move forward in Kenya beyond what we can do in Canada simply because of funding. The second real big success from this was our lab's first experience with a qualitative study. So we were collecting and gathering narrative data. So people's thoughts, opinions, words, and interacting with survivors and parents of children with retinoblastoma, and especially the discussions around psychosocial care and the experiences we observed of people getting to know each other, speaking about research, having these realizations that there's more to uncover about retinoblastoma that they might not know about. It actually gave us the idea for CRAB. And so this study is really where we came up with the idea for a community of researchers, clinicians, and patients to come together to discuss research and co-create research together.
Great. Sounds fantastic. All we have to do is get more funding for Canada to help it keep moving forward. Great. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide.
We also have Dr. Galley had a raised hand.
Okay.
I think you might be on mute though, Dr. Galley.
Sorry. Yes, I was going to ask Helen if it would be possible to share the Kenyan cartoon document in both languages with all of us. That would be fascinating for everyone to see, I think.
Sure, I'll look it up on my computer and maybe at the end I'll share it.
Good.
Fantastic. Okay, we can move on to the next one. So in terms of results and experience with retinoblastoma, genetic testing and counseling was the first thing. And Genetic counseling provides an opportunity to clarify basic genetic concepts and RB genetics, the specific implications for the survivor. But it was clear from the study that these concepts were not always understood. Genetic testing and counseling was found to be of benefit to the participants in that it helped allay the guilt for parents who weren't RB1 carriers. And genetic and prenatal testing enabled cancer to be predicted earlier. And also genetic testing gives individualized risk for future with regards to heritability and second cancer risk. Participants identified challenges in accessing information on RB genetics. And the genetic information generally is given at a very stressful time during their child's diagnosis, and therefore the information is not well retained at that time. So participants requested more simplified information during treatment and follow-up when they were more likely to understand and internalize the information. Participants suggested development of usable written material, which could first be explained by healthcare professionals and then offered to survivors for long-term reference. In terms of the participants, there were really, well, when we discussed challenges in coping with RB diagnosis, there was a lot of experience of guilt and blame throughout. And then in terms of social support, it's important, and family is most often the source of emotional support in coping with RB. Those who did not have a family support noted that it's important to have access and knowledge of social supports early in the diagnosis to help families cope. Also, social and family relationships are impacted by RB. Diagnosis is not easy on siblings. Parents need support to communicate with extended family about RB genetics. So family genetic counseling was really requested. So there's a need for individuals to fully understand their individual genetic results, their individual situation, and where they fit within the full RB genetic spectrum. So participants suggested development of flowcharts to make this more understandable for families. And I guess it looks like that is happening with the Kenyan study. Okay, next slide. So in terms of any questions now, if there are any genetic counselors or ophthalmologists or other healthcare professionals, I'm just wondering if you have any comments about the results so far. Would you be surprised by anything that has come up?
Hi, it's Bruce Crooks here. I think it's very interesting. I'm a pediatric oncologist and I look after the retinoblastoma community here in Halifax. I think it's very interesting that that pretty much this is echoed through a lot of other literature in that we try and give as much information at a really, really stressful time. And most people are just sort of trying to hang on and to cope with really the diagnosis and dealing with getting their little one through it. And then we kind of dump all this extra stuff on. People want it at the time, but it is actually very overwhelming. And there really is a need, as you say, to revisit this at a little bit of a later stage. And definitely during follow-up and long-term follow-up is when genetics becomes much more important again. And it's something that I try to build in even into my long-term follow-up care for, especially my inherited retinoblastoma families. So even if they don't necessarily see genetics every time, at least they see somebody who has an understanding of this and can help to provide information and to help to answer questions as well. And then obviously to direct them to genetic counseling when that's necessary.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of the risks associated with heritable cancers, again, it's very difficult, even for healthcare professionals, to communicate to patients and families. And I guess more challenging, especially for parents of RB survivors, to explain to their children and their families, how this all works. So it's, I think, important, for the parents here in the study did request assistance to be able to communicate these concepts to their family. And that was with the flip books for children, genetic sessions for extended family. So those seem to be, certainly very important, things for them to really be able to understand the information well enough to explain it. And I know as a genetic counselor myself, it's been always, something that has been important to me in terms of being able to give somebody the information well enough, but simple enough, so that they can then take that information and be able to readily share it with their families. And I don't think that, if you have a one-shot genetic counseling session, it's, you're able to do that. And so it's great to hear, that people like Bruce are, definitely taking the time throughout the visits to look at what those needs are. And maybe we can chat a little bit more about this, once, if we have enough time at the end. Okay, the other thing was unaffected parent participants were preoccupied with normalizing their child's experience with cancer. And this could mean that their child may not receive the necessary information from their parents. So it's important for healthcare teams to bring the focus back on the second cancer risks, and also family planning, and to bring that to the forefront as children mature. So survivors should also have comprehensive reproductive genetic counseling to better inform them of their reproductive decisions as they enter adulthood. So I'm just wondering, in terms of those things that we've brought up here, are there, well, you can go to the next slide. Would any parents or survivors like to share when they would like their, second genetic counseling session to take place, if that was an option, or for, other healthcare providers, such as your ophthalmologist, to bring?
I'm not sure if that was oh, there you go. I thought you froze for a second, but do we have anyone who would like to share and answer this question?
I can go. Yeah, what a great presentation so far. I think in terms of when is really relevant, so my wife and I just went through genetic counseling as we started family planning, and I think that was quite timely in terms of when we needed to know, right? Particularly maybe like for us, it was about 6 to 9 months beforehand, and it really took that long for us to get all of our ducks in a row, right? In terms of knowing what the risks were, what the implications were, and then also what the procedures that, and our options were as we went into it. So fun fact, my wife's pregnant.
Whoa!
And yeah, figured I'd share that quickly. And they don't have the RB gene. So, but we went through all of that to kind of, it's been about a year-long process. And so now we're just expecting. So anyway, thought I'd share that celebratory news.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing news.
Thank you.
We also had a comment in the chat. Somebody mentioned that if there was opportunity for a second counseling session to be when the child reaches puberty, which is another great time to sort of start talking about implications and what it could mean, and thinking ahead, and maybe keeping it just something in the back of your mind.
Sorry about that. That connection is going wonky because you keep freezing. So I'm missing parts. So hopefully you didn't ask me something in the middle of that.
We have Dr. Galley, would you like to share? I see another raised hand.
Yes, I just think that over the years, when in follow-up, when we see children at Sick Kids, particularly Helen Chan was very, very good at this. We always address the genetics directly to the child at any age and encourage them to consider doing retinoblastoma in a show and tell at school and doing projects on it. And so that they kind of, we hoped, grew up with the concept that it was just part of life and to be dealt with. And I think that's been our standard pretty much, but may not be documented as a standard.
I think that's a great idea. I think keeping the children aware and making sure that they understand from a young age is fantastic.
Could I ask another question? Does the roadmap for the family and the children touch on genetics at all?
So the roadmap that we tested out on a few families did have a sticker for genetics. It was just one sticker, and the project itself, now we're evaluating how the first run of the project has gone. So we'll still have to decide on what the next steps are and what the findings are. But that's a good point. If there is some sort of journey map like that we've been testing, that part of the genetic testing should definitely continue to play a role in it.
But maybe more than genetic testing, the genetic understanding.
That's true. Yeah, that we did only note, have a sticker for genetic testing and counseling. I think it was just rolled into one, but that's a good point. That's two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, would you like us to move on to the next slide, or can you hear us, Mary? Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. We're almost near the end.
Okay, I'm back again.
It's very late at night in Newfoundland.
If Mary, if you don't mind, if you can hear me, I'll read through I think this may be the last slide, and then you can jump in if the connection gets better. So in conclusions, it was found that RB survivors and parents felt that they may benefit from more frequent and enhanced genetic counseling, directly addressing the individuals with the RB1 mutation and available reproductive options, and clarifies implications for family members based on their retinoblastoma genetic status. And the incorporation of feedback mechanisms to assess ongoing understanding may be a way to test and enhance genetic counseling for retinoblastoma in Canada. Now we can continue with just a couple, maybe one last question or comment before we have to end our call for tonight. And I see Dr. Galley, do you have a comment or question?
No, I just forgot to lower my hand. I'm sorry.
No problem. Do any parents or survivors would like to share their further thoughts about how they receive genetic testing, or how they would wish things might change for the future? Oh, Mary, I can see you're moving, but I didn't hear you.
Sorry, my internet connection's going totally wonky. So I missed about 3 or 4 minutes. So anyway, hope you've been doing great without me.
I just read through that last slide. were there any further comments you wanted to add to this information?
No, I'm just, it was actually the information that was there, I found was what I expected, because I believe, from a genetic counseling point of view, having dealt with this for 30 years with patients and, from all types of things, not just retinoblastoma, but, we normally give all of the information when someone's first diagnosed, and it's a terrible time to give them all the information that we have to give. And in most genetics clinics across Canada, there's not a whole lot of follow-up able to be done, because the wait lists for patients to come in to be seen, like I know here in Newfoundland, for some things we had wait lists of up to 5 years, and for our cancer referrals the wait lists were 2 to 3 years. So you didn't have a whole lot of time for follow-up. You would encourage people to give you a call back, when they had questions, but, it really isn't enough. And I think, especially for childhood problems and childhood cancers, you need to do the initial kind of genetic knowledge and the information that they need right at that moment, but you need to continue to do that through the years. And, as a teenager, they need to know kind of what their risks are. And then as an adult, like Jay said, you need to have all the prenatal options gone through. And so I think what we're able to provide in genetic counseling across Canada is not really what's needed, but I guess we're doing the best we can with what we have. I don't know if we're actually meeting everybody's needs in doing that. So that's the biggest problem.
Thank you so much, Mary. We have finished our conversation for tonight. There was one final comment that having a written handout in simple English to discuss how the gene is passed on was an idea that we shared in the chat. So if you'd like to continue chatting, we can continue it on Twitter. I want to say thank you to Mary for sharing this really great information, and your plain language summary is online for somebody who wants to read through that. Our next one is planned for December. So if you're interested in creating a plain language summary and you're a parent or a survivor, you can send us an email and we can connect and I can guide you through the process. The email is retinoblastoma.research@sickkids.ca. I have listed all our social media you could follow us on, and you can visit our website, please, to join the retinoblastoma research community so we can stay in touch. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for this great evening.
Thanks, everybody.